Gasoline prices are going up just in time for the summer driving season. We'll tell you why. And are the robots coming? The White House has concerns about artificial intelligence. Where's that going? This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. Right now, 3 Americans held prisoner in North Korea for more than a year are back on U.S. soil. They arrived early this morning along with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo after what appears to be a hugely successful diplomatic trip to the Hermit Kingdom. And now we know just where and when Kim Jong-un will meet with President Trump. All of this happens against a backdrop of increasing hostilities between another potential nuclear nemesis, Iran, and our ally, Israel. We have Fox team coverage, Benjamin Hall in Jerusalem, with the latest on the exchange of fire between Israel and Iran. But we begin with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts on the major movement on North Korea. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. As he was boarding Air Force One on his way to a campaign rally in Elkhart, Indiana this afternoon, President Trump predicted that his pending summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un would be a, quote, great success. Certainly, the chances of it actually happening were greatly enhanced by the fact that North Korea released the 3 remaining American prisoners that they were holding in Pyongyang. It was just after 3 o'clock in the morning that the 3 Americans detained in North Korea touched down at Joint Base Andrews. President Trump, the Vice President, and First Lady all on hand to welcome them home.
Congratulations on being in this country. Thank you.
The goodwill gesture was enough to seal the deal on a Trump-Kim summit. Just hours later, the president tweeting, "The highly anticipated meeting between Kim Jong-un and myself will take place in Singapore on June 12th. We will both try to make it a very special moment for world peace." The date carries historic significance. It was on June 12, 1987, that President Ronald Reagan gave a speech in then West Germany, a speech that set the stage for the fall of the Soviet Union.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
White House officials say the choice of June 12th was simply a coincidence. Though, as President Reagan found with Gorbachev and Glasnost, President Trump believes Kim Jong-un may want to choose a path out of isolation.
I really think he wants to do something. I think he did this because I really think he wants to do something and bring that country into the real world.
In an effort to keep Kim moving toward the bargaining table, President Trump has dropped the harsh rhetoric of little rocket man and brutal dictator, going so far this morning as to praise Kim for releasing the detainees.
We want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent to these 3 incredible people.
The compliment brought sharp criticism from the Senate Minority Leader.
The exaltation by the president and others of the greatness of North Korea doing this evades me. We can't be fooled into giving the North Korean regime credit for returning Americans that never should have been detained in the first place.
In response to Schumer, the House Speaker today said, "Give the president a break."
3.9. He is preparing for a summit with the leader of North Korea to focus on denuclearization. So I think we all should give the president some leeway on preparing for this summit and to do. And by the way, it was a good faith gesture.
While President Trump liked the idea of a summit at Peace House in the DMZ, where Kim and South Korea's president recently met, Singapore was always the first choice of his aides. Close enough for Kim to get to with a limited fleet of aircraft that is neutral territory for North and South Korea, fully equipped to host a major summit in a city renowned for excellent security.
Just about 2 weeks before this summit, Singapore hosts an international security conference where delegates come from all over the Indo-Pacific, including the United States, to talk about mutual security needs. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's an ideal location.
And President Trump also had his eye on domestic issues today, specifically the Farm Bill, in a White House meeting today with the Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, Senator Pat Roberts of Kansas, and Congressman Mike Conaway. The president said that he expects when the language of the bill is drafted that it will include measures that would require work for people who are on food stamps. While the president said he expects that to be in the legislation, he stopped short of issuing what was expected to be a veto threat if they balked at doing that. Brett?
Hey, John, there's a story in the New York Times headlined, Homeland Security Secretary was close to resigning after Trump berated her. And it goes on to talk about an incident. What do we know about that?
What we do know is that in the cabinet meeting yesterday, I have confirmed this through sources. Kirstjen Nielsen felt like she was singled out and berated by the president over what he saw as a lack of border security. The New York Times report says that she was close to resigning over it and that she had drafted a letter of resignation. What we are hearing from sources at DHS is that a tweet will be coming soon that would deny the existence of a resignation letter. I mean, it may be that she was saying something to the effect of, well, if I'm not doing a good job, maybe I shouldn't be in this job. But as far as drafting a formal resignation letter, that appears to not be the case, at least according to sources that we have heard from tonight. Brett?
Okay, we'll follow that. John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Israel says it struck dozens of Iranian military targets in Syria overnight in what appears to be the most intense fighting between the two Middle Eastern rivals in 45 years. A big story tonight. Correspondent Benjamin Hall is in our Jerusalem newsroom with an update.
The night sky above Damascus lit up last night as Israel launched its biggest air operation since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, targeting Iranian military facilities in Syria. The massive operation saw 50 sites hit, Iran's military infrastructure in Syria, including intelligence sites, logistics headquarters, military compounds and munitions warehouses. The attacks came after Iranian Revolutionary Guards launched about 20 rockets at Israeli troops inside the Golan Heights, the first time Iran has directly targeted Israeli forces.
Iran crossed the red line. Our reactions were according to it.
The rockets were all either intercepted or fell short, but nevertheless, this was a major escalation by Iran. Israel has always said it would never allow Iran to set up permanent military bases in Syria, but Iran has done just that by taking advantage of the chaos of the civil war. The Israeli defense minister said the response was warranted.
If it rains in our country, it will pour in theirs. I hope we have finished with this round and that everybody understood.
Tonight, there is an uneasy peace here. Military reinforcements have been moved to the north of Israel. But Iran's President Rouhani has spoken to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and said he doesn't want an escalation either. The Syrian government has distanced itself from Iran's rocket attack. Although some Syrian facilities were used, European sources say that infamous Iranian General Qasem Soleimani used them without permission. If the Syrians had been involved, Israel may well have hit them too. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Moscow visiting Vladimir Putin, and it's thought he was going to try to persuade Putin to prevent his Syrian allies, Iran, from attacking Israel. It appears this hasn't worked. And Brett, there has been widespread international support for Israel's strikes against Iran in Syria, including from some unexpected places. Bahrain, for example, which does not recognize Israel's right to exist, said it understood its right to defend itself. Brett?
Benjamin Hall in Jerusalem. Benjamin, thank you. Back here in the U.S., you and your family may be paying more at the gas pump this summer. Tonight, correspondent Kevin Cork on what is really behind the bad timing for those of you driving during summer vacation.
It's hard not to notice, even when you can't bear to look.
I'm scared to death because I depend on that extra money to pay for my car and to pay for groceries and things like that.
Gas prices once again on the rise, a cash crunch for commuters that really stretches the family budget.
When I first started, gas was only $2.20 a gallon. Now it's up to almost $3 a gallon, depending where you shop. That makes a big difference.
But while the usual talk of the approaching summer driving season being the reason for the rise is out there, experts say there's actually much more at work here than just the calendar. Concerns about the Iran nuclear deal pullout for one, which some speculate could trim global supplies. Consider oil's plunge from over $100 a barrel in 2014 to just below $30 a barrel in early 2016, and accordingly prices fell. But since then they have been on the rise, with West Texas crude, the U.S. benchmark, now topping $71 a barrel. That's up 14% since the beginning of the year. And that means more pain at the pump, with today's national price per gallon averaging $2.84. That's up 19 cents over last month and 51 cents higher than this time last year. Experts say that's in part because Wall Street traders anticipated the president's decision to pull out of the Iran deal.
Well, the market was prepared for the U.S. to pull out. It was a campaign promise. He's been known to do whatever he can in his power, whether good or bad, for the present situation to keep his campaign promises.
The president has also promised to retaliate against those who unfairly manipulate the price of oil. Tweeting just last month, looks like OPEC is at it again. Oil prices are artificially very high. No good, and will not be accepted.
Bret, experts argue there's frankly not much the president can do about the problem, short of tapping the nation's strategic reserves. And that's a move, they say, would only give us temporary relief at the pump, and quite frankly, it would also be quite unprecedented. Bret?
Kevin, thank you. The federal government is reporting a surplus of $214.3 billion in April. That primarily reflects revenue from the annual tax filing deadline. The Treasury Department says last month's surplus increased 17.4% from a year ago. Still, the Congressional Budget Office estimates the deficit eventually will be $804 billion, a $140 billion increase from last year. Investors liked what they heard today. The Dow gained 197. The S&P 500 was up 25. The Nasdaq finished ahead 65 today. You cannot watch movies or television these days without seeing stories about robots or other machines taking over the world. That's science fiction, at least so far. Other people have serious real-world concerns about artificial intelligence. Tonight, correspondent Jillian Turner shows us the debate about the future of this technology.
The world is becoming a computer. Computing is getting embedded in every person, place, and thing.
Artificial intelligence, known as AI, is the emerging technology experts believe will shape the future of human existence. For the first time in history, scientists are predicting innovation won't always be the sole domain of human beings.
My name is Pepper.
Devices spurred by AI are already widely available, and new uses are discovered on a weekly basis. The latest development comes from Google and allows people's smartphones to make appointments on their behalf using a shockingly realistic-sounding digital voice.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? We have at 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine.
AI advances like these are coming so fast and furious, they've got the attention of President Trump, who's launching a new push to ensure companies use the technology responsibly and protect American consumers. This afternoon, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy hosted its first ever summit on AI, bringing together tech giants, including Amazon, Facebook, Google, Intel, and 34 other major U.S. companies. It focused on AI's role in 5 key U.S. sectors: food and agriculture, energy and manufacturing, financial services, healthcare, and transportation and logistics. To date, the commercial use of AI remains largely unregulated, though lawmakers are waking up to concerns about privacy.
The arms race to produce individual predictive results is only increasing, with smart assistants like Alexa and Siri in your pocket and listening at home for your next command.
High-tech leaders have also begun to pursue federal dollars for advancing their innovations, meaning that Congress will have an increasingly large role to play in the development of AI going forward. But it's not just private industry that's interested in using more AI in its products. The U.S. military is also developing new technology, like these patrol robots who serve as the eyes and ears for U.S. troops on the ground. National security experts are ringing alarm bells about the threat of AI cyber attacks, digital tools our enemies can use to attack U.S. cyber systems. They say American development of AI is now an urgent national security priority. Bret?
This is a story we'll follow a lot. Jillian, thank you. House Republicans have gotten the message loud and clear that their grip on power here in Washington may be tenuous. Predictions of a blue wave in which Democrats take over both chambers of Congress have inspired GOP candidates to run harder and stronger, or try to, ahead of the fall election. Tonight, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has the story.
With conflicting polls out there, House Republican leaders and their major supporters are not taking any chances ahead of November's midterm elections. Sheldon Adelson has given $30 million to help the House GOP keep its majority. And House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi may have given Republicans another gift by suggesting she'd increase taxes.
Well, the second part there is accurate. I do think that we should revisit tax legislation in the way that we always have, in a bipartisan, transparent way, that the result is unifying for the country.
Republican campaign operatives say they plan to play that clip until Election Day in November and suggest it might be the shot in the arm needed to energize the GOP base.
Is that enough to alarm Republican voters across the country?
They want to raise taxes on hardworking Americans. They want to raise taxes on businesses. They want to make it harder for American businesses to stay in America. I can't imagine that America will want that to happen.
House Republican Whip Steve Scalise says his members can run on their record.
The last thing people want to do is turn the clock back and go back to when Pelosi was Speaker and they raised taxes. They rammed through a lot of legislation that wrecked the economy.
The chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee told Fox his side is ready for a battle.
I'll stand by our candidates. I'll stand by our polling. I never said this would be easy. We're going to have to fight for every inch and just know that we're going to be in a position to do so.
As part of trying to win their races, some Democrats are calling for new leadership and say they won't support Pelosi. She is downplaying it for now, saying she's just focused on winning back the House. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Up next, President Trump hails a major intelligence victory, the capture of several ISIS leaders. We'll have a live report from the Pentagon. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 17 in Nashville, as officials say several students and a teacher were injured in an accident at a high school science lab. The incident at Merrill Hyde Magnet High School in Hendersonville happened when a component found in detergent and cosmetics combined with some type of alcohol to cause a chemical reaction and flash fire. None of the injuries are believed to be life-threatening. Fox 2 in St. Louis as jury selection begins in the trial of Missouri Republican Governor Eric Greitens. He's accused of taking an unauthorized photo of a woman while she was partially nude during a 2015 sexual encounter before he was elected. Greitens has acknowledged the affair. He has refused to say whether he took that photo. And this is a live look at Orlando from Fox 35. The big story there tonight, moments ago, the postponement of the SpaceX scheduled launch of an upgraded rocket called the Falcon 9 Block 5. It will be carrying a satellite into space for Bangladesh. Another try is expected for tomorrow. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. For a special report, we'll be right back.
Out by Iraqi security forces following an alleged tip from Turkish intelligence. A close associate to Baghdadi who issued fatwas and oversaw ISIS education led the Iraqis to the other leaders. All in all, 4 Iraqis and 1 Syrian were captured, including the man in charge of internal security in Deir al-Zor, the ISIS capital in Syria. It was a 3-month operation that involved complicated intelligence sharing with the U.S. and Turkey, according to Iraqi officials. The Pentagon released the following statement from a spokesman in Iraq, quote, "We congratulate the Iraqi security forces on their recent capture of ISIS leaders on the Iraq-Syria border. These arrests are a significant blow to ISIS as we continue to remove its leadership and fighters from the battlefield." Today's announcement came from Iraqi security officials ahead of upcoming parliamentary elections on Saturday, in which Iraq's Prime Minister Haider Abadi is facing difficulty in the polls. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Senior Pentagon officials also say multiple failures are to blame for the Niger ambush that killed 4 U.S. service members last October. A final report released today cites insufficient training and preparation, and it blames the team's deliberate decision to go after a high-level Islamic State group insurgent without proper command approval. We have new information tonight about President Trump's personal attorney and how some of his financial records got into the public domain. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here tonight to tell us what's going on there, and with it related to being berated by the president in a cabinet meeting just This second, Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen responded this way with a statement from DHS. The president is rightly frustrated that existing loopholes and the lack of congressional action have prevented this administration from fully securing the border and protecting the American people. I share his frustration. Border security is the most basic and necessary responsibility of a sovereign nation. These are complex issues, and I will continue to direct the department to do all we can to implement the president's security-focused agenda. It is my great honor to represent the men and women of DHS who work every day to enforce our laws and secure our nation. DHS officials telling Fox there was no resignation letter, but confirming there was an incident where the president was heated about border security. Some American businesses say the Trump administration's increasing enforcement of immigration law is actually hurting their bottom line. Tonight, correspondent Dan Springer reports from Seattle on how the government is putting the squeeze on some highly trained personnel.
Jiwei Cao from China is among the many foreign workers employed in the U.S. high-tech industry here on an H-1B visa. It's a path millions have taken since 1990, but now the Trump administration is making it more difficult. Applicants are getting hit with requests for evidence, or RFEs, at an unprecedented rate. Historically, USCIS, Customs and Immigration Services, seeks proof that an American can't be found for the job from around 20% of the applicants and approves more than 90%. But since October, RFEs have doubled and approvals are down. Immigration attorneys say it's cooling interest in the H-1B program.
The companies that we do represent, they're doing legitimate applications. They're spending more money, having more questions whether they can actually attain the talent they have because of artificial standards.
The government caps the number of H-1Bs at 85,000 per year, but applications are down each of the last 2 years. The head of USCIS says the increased scrutiny, quote, reflects our commitment to protecting the integrity of the immigration system. Increasing our confidence in who receives benefits is a hallmark of this administration. H-1B critics say the visas undercut U.S. workers and want even bigger barriers.
The Trump administration has said the right things, but they haven't followed through with real actions. So I think we've seen really very marginal changes.
Jiwei Cao's boss sees it differently. He agrees with cracking down on abuse, but says the U.S. needs more foreign talent, not less.
Getting a cleaner, better definition of what is somebody who should stay and get a job here is actually good news. We should also increase the cap so that we can get more of it.
U.S. companies are adapting to the stricter work visa enforcement. Some, like Microsoft and Amazon, are adding jobs in Canada, where it's easier to bring foreigners in. But others, such as the IT giant Cognizant, are following the Trump directive to buy American and hire American. Brett?
Dan Springer in Seattle. Dan, thanks. Further west from you, workers in Hawaii are scrambling to move flammable gas from a geothermal plant near a community where lava is oozing out of cracks in the ground. It's the latest complication during the eruption of the Kilauea volcano. Scientists are also saying the volcano could soon send boulders and ash shooting out of its summit crater in the kind of explosive eruption not seen in nearly a century. One of the most enduring legacies of the George W. Bush presidency is the advancement of the fight against HIV/AIDS. This week, many people are honoring the former president for his efforts. Correspondent Casey Stiegel has the story from Dallas.
Thank you all very much.
In 2003, when George W. Bush signed the President's Emergency Action Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, into law, Mr. Bush himself, the program's visionary, had no idea of the full impact it would have.
Once I was convinced there was a pandemic, we put a strategy together to do something about it.
PEPFAR almost immediately directed a $600 million grant to HIV/AIDS research, treatment, and humanitarian missions. Much of the relief to hardest hit parts of Africa, where the disease had already killed more than 25 million by 2002, and another 30 million were infected. Infectious disease experts, doctors, and life-saving medications started pouring in, giving life and hope to millions who'd otherwise been given a death sentence.
People like you who bet on the future of life of people far away, you were right. You have made history, Mr. President.
The former Rwandan Minister of Health among a long list of distinguished guests at the Bush Presidential Center on Wednesday, celebrating 15 years of the program and looking toward the next 15.
You spend now or you spend later.
But funding for the program may be in jeopardy as certain federal budgets are slashed. Former President Bush penned this op-ed in the Washington Post last year. In part, he writes, "Saving nearly 12 million lives is proof that PEPFAR works, and I urge our government to fully fund it. What's more, many experts agree it actually makes Americans safer."
National security-wise, we have a whole generation of people who like us. We need friends.
Despite HIV/AIDS infections being significantly down in parts of Africa and childhood infections decreased by more than half, medical experts warn not to wave the white flag until there is a cure for the disease. Bret.
Casey, thank you. President Bush being honored in Washington here tonight. The President, Trump, welcomes home hostages from North Korea as Iran and Israel increase hostilities. We'll talk about all of that with the panel when we come back.
That's completely up to Iran, whether they cease their war against us. Israel is responding to outrageous and aggressive provocations from the Iranian regime. Any country which would see an enemy like the Iranian regime, which openly calls for our annihilation, would be forced to respond.
The General Command of the Army and the Armed Forces is reaffirming its readiness to confront any aggression rigorously and with responsibility. And it also assures the useless attempts to help terrorism are crumbling under the strikes of our army.
This just further shows that the Iranian regime cannot be trusted.
Well, Iranian rockets from Syria, inside Syria, were fired into Israel in the Golan Heights. Then the response happened. 50 different military targets inside Syria hit by the Israelis, the biggest operation since 1973. There you see the different targets hit. We're told by the Israelis that 28 Israeli aircraft were used, 60 air-to-ground missiles, 16 tactical ground-to-ground missiles, and it was a big operation. Where does this go from here in this proxy war, if you will? Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hilton is a former advisor of British Prime Minister David Cameron and host of The Next Revolution here on Fox News Channel. Mo Alethi, executive director of the Georgetown Institute of Politics, and Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Byron, it didn't get a ton of coverage today, but I think the prospect of this becoming a major thing in the Middle East could be big.
Yeah, and the question is, what does it have to do with what has just happened with the Iran deal? But clearly, Iran and Israel have been conducting a shadow war in this area for quite a while, and it's been getting worse and worse and worse. I think what was striking was the reaction of the Trump administration, a very, very strong message in support of Israel, not only affirming Israel's fighting back, but its right to fight back and defend itself. So I think we saw, and also just the Sarah Huckabee Sanders soundbite we just heard about Iran, I think we've heard a very different message out of this White House than the previous one.
Mo, in the wake of the Iran nuclear deal decision, it seems like the prospect of this happening is greater.
I think that's right, and I think that's what a lot of our European allies were worried about. That this, I agree with Byron, there's been this shadow war that's being fought, and there was a lot of concern from European allies that by walking away from the deal, it might stoke tensions just enough to make that shadow war bubble up to the surface and make it more intense. I don't think anyone questions Israel's right to defend itself. I think we all stand with Israel, but you heard from our European allies today calls, pleas for a level of measured response, that we do not allow this thing to escalate as it so easily could, and try to bring everyone back to the negotiating table to find a new deal.
But on the flip side, Steve, on the Iran deal, Iran was not spending on infrastructure projects in Tehran or filling the potholes. They were obviously investing in military operations in Syria and funding Hezbollah with a lot of that money.
Exactly right. And in a way, you couldn't have asked for a better justification for what the president did with the Iran deal. It proved the point that that actually Iran is an aggressive, warmongering regime. It wants to control the whole region. For a long time now, the policy of the US and the European allies and others has been appeasement, essentially, saying if we talk to you and we give you money and we support you, then maybe you'll change your ways. That hasn't happened. And so now we're in a new world where the policy is to stand up to the bully, to confront the bully. And that is not comfortable. It's not easy. And you can see that the allies in Europe are getting nervous, but their policy has failed to contain Iran.
But the allies in Europe are also not the only allies in the whole world to be concerned about. There's the Egyptians, there's the Saudis, there's the Emiratis. I mean, there are a lot of other people in the world who have a big stake in this, I think, who support what the United States is doing here.
All right, let's talk about this big moment overnight. We've covered it, the 3 Americans coming home from North Korea. And the question was, who gets credit and how much North Korea credit is there now that this summit is set in place? Here's the president and the Senate Minority Leader.
I want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent, incredible people.
The exaltation by the president and others of the greatness of North Korea doing this evades me. We can't be fooled into giving the North Korean regime credit for returning Americans that never should have been detained in the first place. American citizens are not diplomatic bargaining chips.
What about that, Steve?
This reminds me so much of one of the fundamental mistakes, I think, that President Trump's critics make over and over and over again. They focus almost entirely on his words, his performance. They're almost like TV critics rather than political analysts, and they ignore the substance. Okay, sometimes he says words that wouldn't be considered diplomatic and in the normal kind of parlance of politics, but he gets the results. And they focus on the superficial and ignore the fact that he's actually making real progress.
Mo.
It's way too early to know whether or not he's making progress on North Korea. Well, the North Korean dictator seized American citizens, 2 of which under this administration, under this president, and returned them today, just as we're about to head into a summit. I am hopeful. I am a Democrat, but I am hopeful that our president is successful in this summit. But there are many flags here. There are many things that we need to be concerned about, and that this North Korean dictator is looking to be seen as an equal of the United States. When you look at the comments he has been making, it isn't about, he's promising to stop nuclear testing. Why? Because he believes that their nuclear tests are already successful enough. He says the total denuclearization of the peninsula. That means the United States, too. So I hope the president can go, and if he can negotiate something successful with the North Koreans, I will be among the first to applaud him. But there are a lot of red flags here, and I worry that the North Korean dictator is playing him a little bit.
June 12th, Singapore. We obviously don't know the details, and the devil will be in the details. But a month ago, a lot of people in this town were saying we're heading to war with North Korea.
Absolutely. First of all, the June 12th in Singapore means it's more likely to happen. Remember, there's a lot of talk about how it would not happen. But also, can we just say that the release of the 3 Americans is great news? I mean, it's good news for them. It's good news for the United States. And it is good news for Donald Trump. So and it's not conditional on the success of the North Korean talks. If they don't succeed, just like they've never succeeded before, this is still just good news in itself.
Yes.
All right, next up, President Trump and the Farm Bill.
This important bill will reauthorize farm and nutritious assistance programs for 5 years while making reforms to modernizing key programs and better support rural America.
I think it is unfortunate the majority is pursuing a policy now, both on the Farm Bill and on the rescission bill, that seeks to undermine the safety and security of those who are nutritionally underserved in this country.
So maybe you didn't know, food stamps falls under agriculture. And the Farm Bill covers this. It's a big deal. The White House is suggesting that the president may veto it, stopping short of a veto threat. But here it is. It's $868 billion over 10 years, expands the number of under food stamps, but adds work requirements. And take a look at this. The work requirements. Adults between the ages of 18 and 59 required to work or participate in work training for about 20 hours per week. Seniors, disabled people, those caring for children under 6, and pregnant mothers exempt from these work requirements. But that's the sticking point. And the White House is essentially saying, the president's saying, I want those in there. We're back with the panel. Mo.
I don't think you'll find a lot of people who are opposed to work requirements outright, in that it was part of the last go-round, right? During the Clinton administration, they imposed work requirements. Now, the Republicans in the House want to tighten that. That's a legitimate point of debate. You'll see both parties argue. The president threatening to veto even after stronger work requirements because they're not strong enough for him, is where I think a lot of people, maybe even some Republicans, may say, whoa, the people who are going to be the most affected by a veto and by these work requirements are actually in the states that Donald Trump won. And so I think there's a lot of folks on both sides that are a little skittish about his veto threat.
You know, the Farm Bill is very complex. There's a lot of elements to it. The food stamp part is just one of them. I've talked to Republicans who say they want to have this battle on work requirements because they think it's practical and that it polls really well.
Yeah, first of all, the president has kind of a sketchy history on veto threats right there. But conservative Republicans have felt for a long time that under the Obama administration and before that under the Bush administration, the government encouraged too many people to go on food stamps. This was a level of dependence that upset a number of conservatives. And you're seeing that being pushed with the work requirement. And by the way, in exchange for the work requirement, you have continued, huge agricultural subsidies that they will vote for. So this is something that Trump has picked up on somewhat. He talked about it in the campaign, and in the White House, he has been happy that with an improving economy, the number of people on food stamps has actually been going down.
It's a lot of money in this bill, and there's a lot of stuff in there that people have a problem with. This is just one of the battles of...
Yeah, and this happens every 5 years, and I'm glad there seems to be more scrutiny this time around, because it's one of the worst things in our government. This whole farm bill is just a giant swampy bargain, basically. The Democrats get the welfare payments that they want and high government spending. The Republicans, what they get is subsidies for the giant agriculture businesses and food corporations that give them money in campaign donations. The whole thing is totally disgusting, and actually the president should veto it on those grounds alone.
So what about, speaking of swampy, you've got this story about Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, getting money from companies. There's the question about the Russian tie, but there are companies that are paying Michael Cohen for influence or advice on various things, including AT&T on the Time Warner merger. Your thoughts on that?
It's exactly what Donald Trump was elected to stop. You can't blame Donald Trump personally for this. This was happening just before the election, at the time of the election. It's Michael Cohen. He's out there cashing in on his connection to Donald Trump to make money. And we know that that goes on in D.C. the whole time. That is right at the heart of the swamp, people selling access for cash. But the fact that he's doing it just at the moment when he's been elected, when his boss has been elected to change all that, is really sickening.
But it happens, Mo. I mean, this town operates like this. I know he said what he said on the campaign trail, but
I could not agree with Steve more here. Here's a guy who promised that he was elected because people don't like that that's how this town operates. These are people who felt like the system was stacked against them, that the deck was stacked against them, and Donald Trump said all the good words to make them feel like he might finally level the playing field for them. He hasn't, and it's not just the Michael Cohens of the world. The lack of transparency.
Action. A number of the items on candidate Trump's Drain the Swamp action plan have actually been implemented with respect to executive branch officials lobbying and so on.
But he has become less transparent of a White House, where people don't know who seeking access is coming into the White House, what they're asking for. And I think Democrats have a real opportunity that they are missing here by making this a core part of their 2018 argument. This guy promised you that he would do things differently and drain the swamp. He has kept it as swampy, if not swampier.
Quickly.
Don't forget the embarrassment for the companies involved. Novartis pays Michael Cohen $100,000 a month, $1.2 million a year for his insights on healthcare issues. This is not a good use of the company's cash.
They want to talk to the board on that.
Exactly.
Panel, thank you. When we come back, fulfilling a mother's dying wish.